I recently benchmarked a $75 graphics card, the RX 580 8GB. Honestly, it held its own pretty well. You can play Warzone at 1080p with ultra settings and average 70 FPS. And it even plays Cyberpunk at 1080p with high settings and you get close to that 60 FPS mark. Now for $75, that performance is honestly pretty good. But if you had an extra $25 to $35 to spend, you could buy this, the GTX 1660 Super. Now right off the bat, it has 2GB less VRAM than the RX 580, but that video memory is GDDR6 versus GDDR5. And the GTX 1660 Super is on a completely different, newer architecture, and it's built on a 12nm process. Basically, it's better and more efficient than the RX 580. It was released back in 2019, so it'll be 5 years old in October of this year. And just like the RX 580, it had the same MSRP of $229, but now I frequently see it sell for $1 Benji, but honestly, I see it sell for a lot less than that. That's personally what I pay, under $1 Benji. I have the Asus Tough model. I bought it on eBay for $86 with shipping, and it came nicely packaged in an original box. Let's go ahead and check out the performance of this GPU, and I'll compare it to the RX 580 so you can see if it's worth spending the extra money. But first, a word from our sponsor. Super CDK is running their back to school sale, and it's perfect if you just built a new PC or you happen to flip computers as well. Instead of dropping $200 on a Windows key from Microsoft, visit Super CDK down below and be sure to use the discount code SPLA to get 25% off. You can get Windows 11 Pro for $22 after the discount. You can get Windows 10 Pro for $17. The discount code also saves you money on other Microsoft Office products such as Office 2019. Once you're ready to check out, they accept different forms of payment. Once you get the key, activating it is so simple. Head to your orders page on Super CDK, click Get Key, then just copy and paste it into your window activation settings, and bam, no more watermark, and you saved yourself $200. Thank you Super CDK for sponsoring this video. Be sure to check out their back to school sale with the links in the description. Here's the computer that I'm using for testing. It's rocking an i5-12400F and 16GB of DDR4 clocked at 3200 MHz, and all the games are installed on an MSI Spatium M470 Gen 4 NVMe SSD. As I said, I am comparing it to the RX 580, so I'm gonna test the same exact games with the same exact settings. For our first test, I ran a 3D Mark Time Spy. This system, we scored an overall score of 6,348, and we got a graphics card score of 5,992. Now the RX 580, that one had a GPU score of 4,356, so right off the bat, we have a performance difference of about 37%. The win obviously going to the GTX 1660 Super. Let's get right into the gaming benchmarks. I loaded up Fortnite at 1080p with DirectX 12, 100% 3D res scale, far view distance, and everything else on low. These are considered pro settings, and I can test in performance mode, but these give me more consistent FPS numbers. I thought I got into a lobby with no one. I then pulled up on this Deadpool. We emoted like a couple of homies, but then I just straight up murdered him. I then pulled up on this one guy, and he jumped over my car like I show speed and proceeded to punch me out with the stupidest I've seen in the game. I guess I get what I get. Anyways, we averaged 193 FPS and a 1% low of 84. Now, if you look at the RX 580's performance, we only averaged 128 FPS, so we see an increase of about 50% in Fortnite. Not bad if you want to play some Fortnite. Up next is Apex Legends. I also tested at 1080p with high settings with TSAA on, max FOV, which is 110, and then like I said, everything else was at high settings. I was just playing in a control mode, and with that configuration, we averaged 135 FPS and a 1% low of 97. Now the RX 580, that average was only 90 FPS, or literally our 1% low was better, and we see another increase of about 50%. Warzone Resurgence is next. I'm running that game at 1080p with ultra settings. Now I was already impressed with the RX 580, so let's see what this GPU can do. Right off the bat, the game looked kind of choppy to me, so I just went and checked my settings and everything looked normal. I then exited the settings, walked outside and wrecked this guy. He's probably hella pissed. I went for a finisher and got instant karma. But hey, I came back and hit this snipe and then died again. We averaged 70 FPS and 1% low of 53. And so far, this is the only game we didn't see a difference in the average FPS at all. However, we did see an increase in the 1% lows, about a 96% difference for the 1660 Super. You'll just get a smoother experience. Now for our last easier to run game, I'm running Rainbow Six Siege at 1080p with the Ultra preset. For some reason, it wouldn't go above 60 Hz, so I'm sorry if the footage is choppy. But either way, this game's been around a while, so it's pretty optimized and runs great on a lot of older hardware. With the 1660 Super, we averaged 226 FPS, and the RX 580 averaged 162 FPS, so we see an increase of about 39%. And like we saw in Apex Legends, these 1% lows were literally the RX 580's average FPS. Time for some AAA titles, and this is where the RX 580 was beginning to show its age. First up is Helldivers 2 at 1080p with the medium preset. This one we averaged 66 FPS and 1% low of 61. It was honestly really smooth. Now the RX 580, that one averaged 38 FPS, so we see an increase of about 73%. The GTX 1660 Super completely blew the RX 580 out of the water, and I was even able to bump the settings up to the high preset, and it still performed better. Now in Cyberpunk 2077, I just ran the in-game benchmark at 1080p with the high preset. With that, we averaged 68 FPS and a 1% low of 50. Now the RX 580, that one only averaged 49 FPS, so we see an increase of 38%. Quick round of applause for the 1660 Super. I also tested the first Descendant. I didn't test this one with the RX 580 because it wasn't out by the time I made the video, and I had already sold the graphics card. So this is a new game. Obviously it's going to be unoptimized, especially for older hardware. The recommended specs are an i7 7700K or Ryzen 5 2600X on AMD's side. Now for the GPU, they either recommend an RTX 2060 or RX 5600 XT. Now we weren't getting a 60 FPS experience, but it was pretty smooth. We were able to average 48 FPS at 1080p with the medium settings. I would say this is completely playable, and based off the other tests, I think the RX 580 would average around 30 FPS. What do you think of this graphics card? Do you think it's worth the 25 to 35 extra dollars you would spend? I'm gonna say yes. This thing is perfect for esports titles at a high refresh rate, and even AAA titles at medium or high settings. Now if you want to see the video where I benchmarked the RX 580, go and click here. And if you want to see me benchmark an older GPU like the GTX 970, go ahead and let me know down below with a comment, because I have 3 of them.